Eastern Empire thought their armored tank division was invincible. But between Gabiru's wyvern riders drawing their fire from above and Gobta leading a daring ground charge right into their blind spots, we were about to introduce them to our own trump card, the flare bomb. Of course, the Empire wasn't done yet. Their airships were carrying magic cancelers, and they were about to change the rules of the battlefield itself. If this story is pulling you in, hit like, tell me in the comments which Tempest strategy you would trust, and subscribe for the next episode. Patreon members get early access and help cover the AI narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and renders that keep this project moving. Now, back to the moment Tempest counterattack begins. Time to use thought communication to set up a conference call. Benimaru, Gobta, Testarossa, and I were on the line. I also activated Mind Accelerate to make the best use of physical time possible. That way, we could have a productive meeting in a matter of minutes. Through the thought link, I asked, so what do we do now? I wanted to hear Benimaru's opinion.
Right now, Gabiru and his troops are on their way to launch a raid on the enemy tank force. I would like Gobta's force to move out and help execute a pincer strike on them.
Still inside the link, I asked. Isn't that dangerous?
It is, but Gabiru's force will serve as a diversion. Gobta's force will use that opportunity to attack. The tanks pack more destructive force than expected, but their mobility is within our expectations. We stand a good enough chance of winning.
Bold words from Benimaru, to be sure. Thanks to this little skirmish, we now knew that Gabiru's air force could fly faster than the tank guns could turn. According to Benimaru, if Team Hiryu focused on evasion, they would not be hit by any gunfire. He thought it would be very hard to shoot them down, but I mean really, if I was flying around up there, I would be pretty scared. Gabiru, despite it all, was a seriously brave dragon youth, so I did not think he would have a problem with it, but still. Benimaru had a point though. As long as you were in flight, all you had to do was get out of the line of fire and you would not take any damage. As for Gabiru, I was sure his fighting spirit would get him through this. That left Gobta's team. Gobta sounded startled through the thought link. We're going in too?
You are going to be the star of the show, but do not worry. Once you are in among them all, they will slow down to avoid any bouts of friendly fire. So when Gabiru and his force start their diversion, run as fast as you can.
These orders sounded monstrous to me, ogreish if you will, which I supposed was appropriate for Benimaru's species. Gobta tried to confirm the plan. Okay, so you want us to keep up shadow motion while we're doing this? Benimaru shook his head before answering.
That will be dangerous. The enemy will likely have a variety of defensive measures in place, like monster detection and protective barriers. They might have anti-skill measures as well, so it is best not to get fancy with our tricks.
I agreed with him on this. There was no way the enemy would keep their treasured tanks that vulnerable. It was safe to assume there was a full defensive arsenal on them. Anti-skill barriers were a known thing too, and if they used those on us, we were in trouble. Maybe it was actually safer to just go for a frontal attack here. Testarossa added, calm and precise. There is a Legion magic known as Interface Barrier that I am aware of. It is a magic spell that prevents surprise attacks from other dimensional spaces, but it also may potentially block the Legion from moving. As Benimaru said, a head-on rush is probably the safest way to go. Testarossa summed up what I wanted to say very well. Gobta sure seemed convinced. Gobta's reply came out much more carefully. I get it. If you say so, Testarossa, I'm not gonna complain about anything. Wow. Gobta was so freaked out by her. But after the way she slammed someone incomprehensibly more powerful than him, it was only natural that he would be kind of intimidated. I was hoping, or looking forward to, well, let's just say that I would keep a close eye on how their relationship panned out. I told Gobta through the link. Gobta, you should know that people are not always what they seem. Keep that in mind and please try to avoid making the same mistakes again, okay? You could say that to me as well, I guess. I mean, I did not even realize what Testarossa and company were until it was spelled out for me. Gobta answered. Righto, I'm real sorry about it. Good idea, Gobta. Outside the call, Benimaru asked me.
What is he talking about?
I answered him out loud. Oh, it's not really a secret, I guess. Just Gobta putting his foot in his mouth again.
Ah, you mean about Testarossa? Well, he is maturing, yes, but in the most important parts of his life, not so much. It is not a bad thing for him to get burned now and then.
He chuckled at this, then continued.
By the way, who were the people that Diablo brought back with him? I sense a certain ominous vibe from the 3 girls in particular, but...
Benimaru had accepted them without complaint because I had clearly given them my seal of approval. But he was still wondering where those ladies came from, no doubt. Then again, these were primals. Real bad news in demondom. Maybe he was better off not knowing. On the other hand, I could not just keep it a secret forever, could I? It was hard for me to keep my mouth shut to the very people I trusted the most. I was sure Shion did not know and would not care, but maybe I should tell Benimaru the truth after all. I lowered my voice. Let me tell you about them in a bit, all right? Benimaru shrugged.
Indeed. Not a topic to worry about during a war.
And if he was willing to agree to that, it was time to shift gears. Back on the thought link, Benimaru addressed Gobta.
All right, Gobta. We are at war right now. It is good to reflect on your past mistakes, but it will not matter unless you come back alive.
Gobta answered, Yeah, I know.
Is there anything you do not understand about your mission?
Gobta was focused now. No problems here, Benimaru. We'll move over to the edge of the forest and rush in just as Gabiru launches his attack.
Very good. Put everything you have into this.
Gobta snapped back. Yes, sir. The fright was gone from Gobta's voice. I was sure he would be able to concentrate on the mission now. And in another few moments, our thought communication conference was over. A few minutes later, the 3rd Corps led by Gabiru attacked the tank battalion.
Behold my exploits! You slow-moving bastards are no match for us!
Gabiru was in his usual form, making a big show out of everything he did. I had my concerns about it, but that was just Gabiru being Gabiru. And indeed, the tanks struggled to react immediately to his force. As Benimaru had predicted, their guns were unable to catch Gabiru and his cohorts. That was largely to Gabiru's credit. He demonstrated superb command, and everyone reacted to him with perfect coordination. That must have been the result of a great deal of training. While I was not paying attention, they had acquired some remarkable skills in air combat. Team Hiru was doing a fine job, but the 300 Wyvern Riders were putting in a great effort too. I guess we had managed to build up a decent amount of spare riders. Once we procured some more Wyverns, I figured they would become a real force to be reckoned with. Gabiru was all about creating a diversion out there, but that did not mean they were not attacking at all. He was having the Wyverns spit fireballs, providing another feint. That B+ rank was not just for show on those guys. They were easily as good as the fireballs conjured by your average sorcerer. Not enough to break through a tank's magic defense maybe, but it was still effective against infantry. It was a nice primer on just how effective Gabiru's air-to-ground strikes could be. And while the results they put up were minimal damage-wise, they expertly fulfilled their tactical role. Gobta too had successfully switched mental gears. There was no hesitation in his command, and he was charging straight at the tank forces with head-on, perfectly timed movements. There were 500 tanks facing Gobta's force, with another 1,500 lined up and pointed toward the Dwarven Kingdom. If the Goblin Riders could get that far into their ranks, the Empire would not be able to make any careless moves. It would be a huge victory for us if that happened, but the Imperial forces were not incompetent either. They would desperately try to block them, and from there on, it would be a battle of skill and speed. Gobta seemed to understand this, and as he followed Benimaru's orders, he used his thunderous speed to zoom toward the battalion. Not a moment's attention was paid to the muzzles pointed at them, not a hint of fear. There was only about 100 yards left to the front row. The Goblin Riders could run that distance in under 6 seconds. A few shots were fired their way, but the Goblins did not flinch, keeping up their speed. In fact, the shells exploded far away from them. Presumably, they were warning shots. It only proved that the Imperial army was in a state of turmoil. Not a single move was wasted among the riders as they disposed of the obstacles blocking their way with computer-like precision. Even now, the infantry members guarding the tanks were trying to engage them, but the wolves made quick work of them. Range, 0. They had successfully approached the tank battalion, their primary target. There was Ranga running in the lead, Gobta looking as manly as he could muster on his back. He gave a silent signal to Gobchi running right behind him, and Gobchi nodded back. The next moment, Gobchi split off from the platoon, headed up to a tank turret, and threw a little something inside, a glowing red jewel. This was an element core. Kurobi had manufactured a bunch of empty cores for me, and then I had Cheris infuse them with flame magic. Flare bombs, you could call them. But would these work? A resounding explosion shot forth from inside the tank at its weakest point. If this did not have the desired effect, we were planning to abort the mission at once. I could not help asking, "Will this be okay?" Veldora answered with absolute confidence.
Do not worry, Rimuru. Trust in our friend Charis.
Cherries backed him up, sounding just as proud as ever. "Yes, Sir Rimuru, take heart. If I put in just enough magical power that it didn't spontaneously explode, I am sure it'd be no problem to disable that hunk of iron. I'm sure it'll be fine too, but this is our first time experimenting with it, so of course I'm gonna be..." The tank exploded. I immediately started bragging. "See? I told you, didn't I? I told you my plan was foolproof. I was the one who came up with this idea, you see. That was why I was so anxious about it. But if it worked, now I wanted to brag about it." Cherries gave me a resigned answer. "Oh sure, bask in it." Veldora joined in with a smile.
That is so like you, Rimuru.
I shot back. "I don't need that from either of you." Cheris was tremendously proud of himself. Benimaru and Beretta gave that a resigned chuckle. Xion and Diablo just smiled. The second phase of the operation was a success, and now the atmosphere around here was notably more cheerful. So far, this was just a prelude. The next goal was to get deep inside of them, pay no mind to the battalion facing Gobta's force, and strike the middle of their army. The goblins ran on, striking at the infantry positioned to protect their tanks' blind spots, like a giant monster swarming across the battlefield in all directions. Their movements, shown on our big screen, had a refined beauty to them. I said, "Gobta's sure done it, hasn't he? Now none of those tank guns can target us." Benimaru cautioned me.
No, we cannot be too careful. Depending on their commander, they may shoot at us anyway and accept any collateral damage.
That was absurd. But then again, this was war. We had to be prepared for that.
Besides, the enemy has air power too. It is still too early to rest easy.
That's right, I thought, turning my gaze to another large screen. Looking at the enemy aircraft on it, I could tell they were increasing their speed. It seemed the Empire could stay in communication with them one way or another. Once the enemy air force arrived, Gabiru would be compelled to deal with them, leaving the Goblin riders isolated on the battlefield. After that took place, it was a race against time. We needed decisive results while we could get them. As if answering my expectations, the battle continued to progress rapidly. Gobta and Gabiru were both making the most of their training, achieving real results in the first battle of this war. But something always goes wrong sooner or later. As Benimaru just said, it was too early to rest easy. Gaster glared at the approaching goblins with singular abhorrence. His thoughts turned ugly. Damn them, thinking they can own us. He felt a deep, primal resentment for them, and he promised himself that he would take it out on them all shortly. A few moments ago, Testarossa, her pure white hair fluttering in the air, had put a mortal fear inside him. Not wanting to admit it, Gaster decided to rebuild his confidence by tearing the goblins to pieces instead. No matter how fast these monsters moved, he thought, they would just be a disruption, nothing that could damage a tank. But the explosions that roared across the battlefield shattered that idea quickly. No? Gaster had to keep himself from shouting it out loud. No commander could show himself upset on the battlefield. He was still an able leader, and he had not lost his ability to make sane decisions. One of his officers asked, "Lieutenant General, what will we do?" Gaster kept his voice steady. "Don't panic. Look at the enemy's moves. They've only destroyed one tank and there's no sign of any follow-up. That bomb was one of the few trump cards they have." The officer accepted the explanation. "Yes, you're right now that you mention it. Otherwise, those flying lizards would be scattering them all over the field." Gaster nodded. He thought he had kept himself calm enough to make the right decision. But this was wrong. In fact, Rimuru had prepared over 3,000 flare bombs for this fight. Every member of Gobta's Goblin Riders carried 10 of them, and every flying lizard, meaning Gabiru and Team Hiryu, also had 10 on hand. Team Hiryu had not used them so far because they were focusing on diversionary tactics. that, and they knew flare bombs would not unlock their full potential unless used in an enclosed space. In such a space, the power of a gunpowder blast was easily doubled, and the same logic applied to flare bombs. Benimaru's focus here was on destroying tanks, not infantry, so he refused to let those bombs go to waste. The important thing today was not instant glory. It was making this operation a success, and Gobta, Gabiru, and all the monsters under their command were aware of this. Gaster, blissfully unaware, was regaining his composure. In his mind, he commended them for unleashing that new weapon, but convinced himself the Empire would still win the day. He might have misread the ace up the Goblin's sleeve, but he did know what they were aiming to achieve. They ignored the left-wing battalion because their goal is to destroy this main force, right? If that's the case, we have our choice of ways to stop them. Gabiru and the lizards were certainly putting on a flashy show up there, but the tanks were protected from that with a magical barrier. The only thing to be wary of was this new weapon, and if that was the case, all they had to do was keep Gobta's force at arm's length. Gaster gave the order, have them deal with them in a compacted air battle formation. The order surprised his second-in-command. Lieutenant General, that's dangerous. Some of us are in close quarters battle with the enemy. We'll be risking friendly fire. Gaster snapped back. So what? If they're in the way, just blow them away with our tank guns. Our glorious Imperial Army doesn't need incompetent louts dragging them down anyway. His aide could only gasp. Wah? And with that said out loud, Gaster's associate could no longer stop him. A few tanks and a lot of infantry would get caught up in the carnage, but the battle was certain to be won, and the aide knew it. Gaster was willing to sacrifice a few pawns to win the day, and without that kind of vision and determination, perhaps being an army commander was impossible. Gaster checked with the staff officer. Are there any legal problems with that? The staff officer answered, No sir, none. The officer accompanying Gaster had no objection. Now it was Gaster's turn to shine. Gaster issued the order directly. Left flank battalion, compacted air battle formation. The order came from him, not through any subordinate, allowing the left wing to take formation faster than ever. Ignoring the infantry overtaken by goblins, they used their remaining vehicles to block the road, then turned their guns so the tanks at the front and rear were all but right next to each other. It was a formation that defied all common sense in modern warfare. Gobta was stunned. What? That's nuts! It was only natural. Taking advantage of their huge size, the tanks crowded together, deliberately trying to close the gaps in their ranks. It would make it impossible for any of them to maneuver, but it worked. Gobta's forces could no longer run through the gaps between tanks. But the surprises were not over yet. Next, the left wing spread out in a circle, forming a barricade around the goblins. In response, half of the central battalion also went on the move, floating into the air before turning around and landing right on the backs of the frontline tanks. Now they were a wall, fully blocking the goblins' way. Nearly 1,000 tanks had linked together to form a single gigantic fortress. There would be no destroying the central force now. Gobta's second-in-command was similarly stunned by the scene in front of him. I heard they could move like that, but I never thought they'd try something like this. Gaster gave the next order. Put up a machine gun barrage and pin them down. This kicked off a three-dimensional sweep of machine gun fire. The multifaceted barrage put the stops on the high-speed maneuvering Gobta's team was best at. They were surrounded by tanks and the infantry accompanying them, and the Empire did not care how many friendlies this strategy killed. Gobta grew upset. This is bad. I'm not sure we can keep going with this operation. Benimaru's strategy was faltering. Seeing the Imperial forces get shot by their own allies made even Gobta panic a bit. Gabiru, meanwhile, sounded strained from the sky.
I am sorry, Gobta. I would love to help you, but we have our hands full.
Gabiru's force was being exposed to aerial bombardment. The tank guns might not have been able to hit them, but those tanks were also equipped with machine guns, successfully keeping Team Hiryu in check. Now Gaster, the man in command, had fully regained his composure. The difference in numbers had become a decisive advantage, and bad news often tends to come in groups. A voice came in over the line. Sorry to keep you, Lieutenant General. The Flying Combat Corps, led by Major General Farraga, had just shown up. They were 100 airships strong, and now they were Gabiru's problem, just as Gobta was facing an even more difficult situation. Gaster welcomed him. It's about time, Farraga. It's a dead end for them now. Now's the perfect time to test out our top secret magic cancelers, isn't it? Farraga laughed. There's no beating you, Lieutenant General. In that case, let's see if we can't get in on this. Gaster answered, "We'll share the credit today, don't get sloppy." Farraga replied, "Yes, sir. Good luck to you." Gaster and Farraga, speaking on a special closed line, swore to fight together. For Gaster, he wanted to make sure this operation was rock solid. For Farraga, this was a warm-up before the main course and a way to show he could be useful in real battle. Despite piloting such valuable airships, the Flying Combat Corps occupied the lowest rung among the three divisions. In Farraga's mind, they needed to start making a name for themselves. And with him in the fray now, things were starting to look bleak for the Tempest force. Gobta's riders, of course, understood the change of tides better than anyone. One rider asked, "What do you say, Commander Gobta?" Gobta decided at once, "This ain't gonna work, let's get out of here." Benimaru approved through the command link.
A good idea. With the situation changed, there is no need to force matters.
Gobta made the right decision. From the get-go, he had one golden rule drilled into him. Do not try to force your strategy, and if something unforeseen happens, retreat to fight another day. And with Benimaru, who had overseen the riders for quite a long time, giving the retreat order, every one of the goblins realized the danger. Even in fleeing, they all worked in unison, turning around without the slightest delay. Then they tried shadow motion to retreat, but Ranga gave the warning the moment he sensed something was wrong. Gobta, the enemy is not that unintelligent. They have begun a magic jamming operation that prevents you from engaging shadow motion. It came a little too late. Even by then, the goblins were already under the influence of the Empire's wide-ranging magic interference. Ranga might have been able to sprint his way out of it, but the rest of his kin could not. The only way out was to run. Gobta shouted, "Everyone, head to the forest as fast as you can!" The goblin riders quickly heeded him. They had about 600 feet of terrain between them in the woods. It would usually take 10 or so seconds to traverse, but being shot at from behind like this, it seemed hopelessly far away. It was now a battle to retreat, and it would prove to be one filled with hardship. Looking at the fleeing goblins, Gaster flashed a brutal smile, then quickly ordered his crew to prepare the tank gun on their vehicle. In his mind, he snarled, "Don't think you bastards are getting off that easy?" They would be using the special ammunition on board. There was just one round left. Following his order, it was loaded into the gun and fired without delay. This special round landed in the forest in front of the goblins, instantly spreading intense flames across it. The aim was to block their path, and while they could use their super-honed intuition to dodge incoming shells, there was not much they could do when their route of escape was burning. Gobta tried to joke through the pressure. "Bad news there. Geez, I wonder if I'm gonna make it back alive." Gobtu snapped back. "You better not kid around like that, Gobta. If I'm here, we're all coming back, got it?" Gobta answered him. "You're always super confident, aren't you, Gobtu? Hearing all that baseless confidence, I feel like a doofus for worrying about anything." Another rider wondered aloud, "I wonder if Commander Gobta is worried too." Gobchi shot that down with a grin in his voice. "What are you talking about? If he is, it's probably over what's for dinner tonight. That, or how he'll apologize to Rigger for partying with Sir Rimuru until late." The goblin riders started laughing, Gobchi and Gobto joining the mix. It was a desperate situation, but the goblins had not lost their usual swagger. And with his ears honed, Gaster overheard the entire conversation. His anger flared again. "Don't you dare mess with me. Now that you're fully surrounded, your fates are in my hands." Gaster's heart burned with passion, but in front of his gaze there was now a beautiful woman with pure white hair, Testarossa. Her face looked cool, despite the blasts of hot air surrounding her, and she did not seem the least bit threatened by the flying bullets. His thoughts turned toward her too. "I will never forgive you for messing with me like that. That pretty little face of yours will be weeping in terror." Gaster was not personally conscious of the faint, dark desires within himself. He had not noticed that his fascination with Testarossa was causing him to make increasingly rash decisions. So with his face evilly twisted, he made another order. "All remaining vehicles, fire our tank guns at the enemy." The order completely ignored the safety of the remaining forces on the left flank, busy hassling the goblins, but nobody was going to argue the point with him. So the remaining 1,000 tanks turned their guns around, just as the fortress wall of tanks was checking the goblin riders' moves. Adjusting their angle, applying anti-shock protection to withstand the force of firing at point-blank range, the muzzles of these deadly, life-reaping tanks were ready to flash in unison. Fierce battle was also unfolding in the skies, the airships launching all sorts of enhanced magic. Gabiru and his team found themselves at a loss to respond. The magicule flows around them had been disrupted. The Empire's top-secret magic cancelers were affecting Gabiru just as badly as the Goblin Riders. Gabiru felt the drag in his own body.
What a menace. The closer we get to those flying ships, the heavier our bodies get.
A subordinate asked him, "What now, Sir Gabiru?"
I would like to go help the goblins, but there is no time for that.
They might have had the time if it was Team Hiryu alone, but they were accompanied by the Wyvern Riders as well, and they lacked real battle experience. Any wrong moves, and both Gobta's and Gabiru's forces could fall at the same time. Gabiru made the only call he could.
We have no choice. We will take those ships down first. We have the numerical advantage. Team Hiryu, concentrate on the enemy in front of you.
One of his men answered, "You got it, boss." Another muttered, "But they're bigger than us, aren't they? Comparing our numbers may not matter." A third snapped, "Shut up, you moron. Sir Gabiru knows that, but that's the only order he can give us." There is always one person in the crowd who cannot get the picture. But despite that exchange, Gabiru and his cohorts prepared to dive right into full-scale battle with the fleet of airships. One of the pilots aboard regarded Gabiru and his force with cold, cruel eyes. This was Major General Farraga, leader of the Empire's vaunted Flying Combat Corps. He was very capable, with a hunger for promotion to match. No officer wanted to find higher office more than he. Despite that, however, Farraga took great pains to lift up his other colleagues, striving to keep them on his side. There was a reason for this. He had been around to see the end of the Magic Division, his former stomping grounds. This Magic Division had once boasted immense power, but now it was dismantled, a relic of the past. Perhaps it was a sign of the times, but it had come to be judged as too inefficient for warfare. People thought that magical warfare was this flashy fireworks show, but in reality it boiled down to a few core tenets. Analyze the enemy's magic, interfere with it, activate your own magic, and strike the enemy's army. Repeat over and over. This tended to never produce significant results, mainly because magically enhanced knights were much stronger in real-life battle situations. Nuclear magic, regarded as the most powerful kind out there, took around a dozen sorcerers to invoke. No one person could cast it casually, and the time to construct the spell was far from trivial. Some champion-level fighters could indeed control nuclear magic solo, but at best they could engineer an explosion the size of a football field. A direct hit from that was powerful enough, yes, but armies could have the anti-magic shield Legion magic cast upon them, and only group magic had the power to overcome that. In other words, individual magic casters were not expected to be active contributors on the battlefield. What was more, while it was important to have the necessary number of casters on hand, it was not a case of more is better. Every battlefield had only so many magicules to harness, and once they were used up, magic users were essentially useless. Thus, while wizards and their kind were indispensable, they were not seen as star performers in battle. Farraga was an excellent wizard in his own right, an art he had honed while studying under Gadora. He respected his teacher, honored what he taught him, and did not neglect his own diligence. But then he realized something. With Gadora helping to modernize the armored division, they would soon have no place left in the military. The times were changing, and soon there would no longer be a need for well-trained casters. With the right spellgun, even ordinary people could control extraordinary magic. And Farraga hated Gadora for it. He felt that his master was strangling himself through his own actions, but Gadora rejected his pleadings at every turn. In Farraga's mind, that was exactly why he betrayed his teacher and swore allegiance to Sir Caligulio. The move had earned him his current position. He took in the people who worked under him, all talented magic casters, and gave them a place to shine. And someday, sooner or later, the Flying Combat Corps would enjoy the honor of being called the strongest in the world. Until then, he would happily kiss up to his colleagues and keep a low profile. That was Farraga's plan, and he kept to it with strict discipline. Now, finally, the perfect opportunity had arrived. An operation to defeat Veldora. The Flying Combat Corps had been chosen as the keystone of the mission. The Corps' plan was to contain Veldora with their magic cancelers while assisting the other units. Logical support was one of their original roles, but they were exempted from it this time. 300 of their airships, out of 400 total, were on other missions, and the remaining 100 were staffed by elite sorcerers to the limit of their capacity. It was a completely battle-focused formation, which showed just how much importance Caligulio placed on this operation. Farraga understood well enough that he needed to succeed. In his mind, he would perform out here and prove their usefulness. It would be a new era for them. He smiled to himself. Once that new era dawned, he would no longer have to curry favor with the other officers. The tables would be turned, and nobody would be able to ignore Farraga's wishes. That was how he thought his life should be, and he never doubted it for a moment. Compared to defeating Veldora, this is not much of a warm-up at all, he thought. But fair enough. Those flying lizards and earthbound dogs are good practice fodder for our new weapon. Farraga lifted the wine glass in his hand as he shouted. "Why should we share the credit?" I asked. "By the time we're done, Lieutenant General, you'll owe us big time." Then he called out to the crew. "Comrades, we have been patient until now, but that ends today. It's time to show them our true power." The crew roared its approval, drowning him out. As a sorcerer who should have been among the elite, Farraga could no longer face the reality of the hardships he had to endure. All that humiliation was about to be overshadowed by the glorious days to come. Every member of the crew was of one mind, and in tune with this, 100 airships stepped up their attack. The most unique feature of the airships was their magic-canceling engines, but they were also equipped with other cutting-edge weapons. These were controlled by magicians well-versed in elemental and summon magic. An airship's structure could be roughly divided into 3 sections: operations, defense, and offense. Each section was assigned a crew of 100, with another 100 serving as reserves, liaisons, and medics. The operations section, needless to say, operated the airship. At least 50 people were required to keep a ship aloft, but if the fleet wanted to operate at full strength, not even 100 were quite enough. The defense section was in charge of the airship's defense barriers, which came in various flavors: anti-physical, anti-magic, anti-attribute, and so on. An airship's outer walls were not particularly thick as a weight-saving measure, so if they neglected to protect themselves with magic, they would be shot down in a flash. No crew would dream of flying without a defensive staff. Finally, the attack division was the most important one. Each airship was equipped with magic amplifier cannons that made it easier for magicians to work together. Multiple magicians would focus their power on a magic ball placed on top of a pedestal. By casting on it at the same time, they could trigger large-scale magic much easier than usual. 1 cannon was in the front of the ship, and 2 were on the sides. There were 5 per ship in total, with up to 10 magicians per cannon awaiting orders and backup standing by to keep up the magical barrage. It is worth noting that a magic amplifier cannon's power increased in direct proportion to the number of people using it. If 2 people were on it at once, the resulting magic force doubled. If a full complement of 10 magicians worked together, it increased 20-fold. This was a serious threat. Even simple fire magic could become more powerful than a full-fledged fireball. It went without saying just how incredible this invention was. The airship's defenses were perfect. The fireballs spat out by the wyverns were no threat at all. Their barrier even prevented damage from ramming the walls. No half-hearted attack had a chance of working, and that kept Farraga satisfied. And we had not even gotten to their offense. Farraga proclaimed to the fleet, exultant command. "Our airships are the strongest there are, and it's time to show their true power. Give me maximum force, and let's knock those annoying lizards out of the sky." Up until then, only 2 or 3 magicians had been casting spells at once, but they had done enough testing. It was time to go on stage. A spell controller, an orb nearly 20 inches wide and made of purified magic stone, was perched atop every magic amplifier cannon. Channeling magic power into it would activate the device. The magicians, sitting quietly until then, lifted up their hands, and on a signal, all 10 unleashed large-scale force. Lightning, icy snow, flames, vorpal blades, and all kinds of other terrifying magic blasted through the sky, amplified 20 times their average strength, and all its fury was focused on Gabiru and Team Hiryu. I had been watching the battle unfold with rapt attention, but now I could not help leaping out of my chair. Gobta's forces were being blown away by the impacts of the tank shells. Gabiru's were falling out of the sky, mercilessly exposed to all-powerful magic. Things were intensifying fast out there, and we were starting to take casualties. I had expected that, of course. I did, but maybe I was still too optimistic deep down. Benimaru seemed so incredibly confident, and Raphael did not say anything, so I naively thought there would not be any problems. But that was not the reality. Of course it was not. We were waging war, after all. There was no way we could win without taking any damage at all. Now my lack of foresight made me feel angry and impatient, but Benimaru remained as cool as ever.
Please, Sir Rimuru, take your seat. This was within our expectations, and there are no problems to speak of.
His words made something blow up inside me. I snapped. What? We're taking casualties out there. Shouldn't I have used Megiddo to help you guys out? No, I had already come to a conclusion about this. Megiddo was affected, yes, but I had already decided it was pretty pointless. Benimaru questioned its effectiveness as well, and even Diablo was negative about it. Apparently, there were several reasons for this. First of all, since we had started this whole thing as a nation, we could not always rely on our master, the Demon Lord, that is me, to be there for us. The Demon Lord was responsible for protecting the monsters under his command, Benimaru asserted, but it was the duty of his subordinates to protect the country. The rest of my staff agreed. If they did not feel that Tempest was their country and they had to protect it with their own hands, they had no right to live here. Shuna had put it this way.
You do not have to take on everything, Sir Rimuru.
I was glad to hear that, and for that matter, I agreed with it. So that was one reason. The second was that Megiddo had a weakness. One Diablo pointed out to me.
This Megiddo is quite a beautiful magic. It provides high power at low cost. It is versatile, and it can be applied in a variety of situations. But once you are familiar with it, you can counter it in so many ways.
I could have launched it from here in the control center, and if I did, I was sure it would be pretty useful too. But once my trick was exposed, it would never work a second time. As Hinata had told me, all they would have to do is conjure up some wind and create a dust cloud or a smoke screen, and its accuracy and power would be lethally compromised. I was pretty surprised that Diablo asked Hinata for her feedback. What an information gatherer he was. But enough about that. Last time I took out Megiddo, I killed every single one of our enemies. The survivors, namely Admaris and Razin, were not going to blab about it, so there was no worrying about information leaks. That definitely would not be the case this time. There was no way we could keep the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Imperial soldiers and officers quiet. Benimaru had also advised me.
A trump card is best always kept safe for the last moment.
Magic that had such an awesome effect at first blush was best not used carelessly, he thought, and Diablo was with him on that. They were pretty convincing. Megiddo is a super high-temperature heat ray created by concentrating sunlight to extreme levels, and it is almost impossible to avoid once sighted. As anti-personnel magic, it is only really an option when used at the right moment. Meanwhile, our opponents here were not really flesh and blood. They were tanks, hulking piles of iron. I was not saying that Megiddo would not work, but I did not think it would be too effective. Raphael calculated that it would take a long time for that magic to destroy the tanks. To penetrate one, I would have to increase the power, in other words, the focal temperature of the heat ray, up to tens of thousands of degrees. And since these tanks were not powered by oil or gasoline or the like, I could not count on them bursting into flames for me. If a penetrating heat ray did not stop a tank, I would have to plug it full of holes until it finally stopped moving, and at that point, it would be a lot easier to blow it away with nuclear magic instead. But doing that meant having to break through layer upon layer of anti-magic barriers, and you would have to kill off the magicians behind them first. That led to this long, drawn-out magic battle. Tactically, it made no sense. It was not going to work. So since I had given command over to Benimaru, my job was honestly just to watch over things. That was all, really, but I started to say it anyway. I should go out, and Benimaru interrupted me in the middle of my statement.
You cannot. As the commander, I cannot put our leader in danger. Above all, I am concerned with the story the hero Chloe told us. In another timeline, someone out there managed to murder you, Sir Rimuru. Asking you to fight out there while knowing such a dangerous person may exist is simply impossible.
I had shared the story of this potentially lethal foe with all my officers, framing it as a potential what-if coming for us. What did they think about it? The answer was obvious from the look on Benimaru's face. Zoe gave me the threat report.
Currently, I would consider as a threat the commanders of the Empire's 3 divisions, along with the 100 members of the Imperial Guardians serving under the Emperor. There might be other hidden figures as well, and we are investigating any potential leads. Please forgive us if this sounds weak-spirited.
He and his team were currently risking their lives to gather information, all for my sake, to eliminate this potential threat to me. Benimaru went on.
With the enemy's strength unknown, it is out of the question to send you, our lord, to the front lines. The operation is underway without any problems. Please, I ask you to trust in me, Gobta, Gabiru, and all who serve them.
At his bidding, I sat down in my chair. I still had this unpleasant feeling in my chest. Not quite annoyance, not quite frustration, but Benimaru's words were simply too true. He was right. If you thought about it, from the very beginning, Benimaru had been thinking about me as he carried out his plans. And not just him. Xian, too, standing behind me and Zoe by my side. Diablo went without saying, but even Shuna looking at me all worried. They all prepared for the reality that anyone who went to battle would have to face sacrifice. Likely that was true for everyone on the front lines too. They were standing out there ready to use themselves as bait to catch a threat they did not even have a visual picture of yet. And even the incredibly self-indulgent Veldora was sitting quietly in the control center ready to protect me if push came to shove. It was all for the sake of protecting me, the king of this nation. The only person who had not resolved himself to it was me. Right then, from somewhere I could not identify, I thought I heard a voice. And that is why I have to be perfect. Great. Are you worried about me too? Well, I'm fine now. It would be disrespectful to be so sad while all these people are so resolved. It is time for me to join them. I apologized out loud. Sorry, I lost some of my cool. Benimaru nodded at me.
Do not worry, Sir Rimuru. Victory will most assuredly be yours.
He flashed me a fearless smile as he made the promise. He was a commander responsible for the lives of his soldiers, and his face was serious to match. Hearing that, I felt the irritation, the conflict, and all those other unpleasant feelings disappear. I had long prepared for my own death and for killing my enemies, but I tried to avoid thinking much about the concept of people dying for me. I needed to accept that. I needed to accept that it was not only for my sake, but for those of their families, the framework of the nation that guarded and defended them, and the fact that I was here to symbolize all that. For these very reasons, I could never allow them to be defeated. As a symbol, I needed to act the part. I needed to put in a suitable performance. Realizing this, I resolved to begin by giving Benimaru the relaxed response he hoped for. I said, of course. I want you to tell everyone what I'm going to say, all right?
By all means.
With Benimaru's consent and cooperation, I was going to transmit my will to each and every one of my people. Thanks to the unique skill Born Leader, they would receive my statement in their minds. I sent the order through Born Leader. Listen to me. Crush the enemy with all your might. There's no need to go easy on them, and of course there is no need to show mercy. Use everything you've got to eliminate the enemy as quickly as possible. I tried my best to put my entire heart into it. Benimaru nodded his approval, the other officers smiling as well, because to them the order meant one thing: the full release of the power kept under control. Correctly understanding the meaning of my words, the monsters resumed their assignments, and thanks to that, the battlefield was about to drastically change.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.